Hello and welcome back to another in-depth discussion by the kids at the Resonant Podcast. Now, this is talking about a few months later after Game of Thrones, really our thoughts on it and looking back at it. Because, of course, you're going to have different views later on when you've looked at a bit of retrospect back at the TV show. If you want to go and watch the whole podcast, it's about an hour long. This is just a short segment from it. We talk, as you can see, about Game of Thrones. We talk about some games and stuff like that, and a little bit about the Yozcast stuff that's come up lately. We go into a little bit like that. I didn't want to put that on the YouTube channel for obvious reasons. But without further ado, guys, make sure you go and check out the full podcast by typing in The Resonant Podcast to any of your favourite podcast apps, or by clicking the link in the description. But sit back, relax, and enjoy today's video on Game of Thrones 3 months later. Anyway, in today's episode, we are going to talk a little bit about Game of Thrones, since it has been almost, well, it's been a 3 and a bit. How long has it been since season 8? Probably like 2 days. But obviously it was a little bit of a shambles. I think that's the main consensus from everybody.
That is a massive understatement.
But since it's been a few months, I think it's good to actually say what we think of it now in
retrospect.
retrogaming.com. Okay, so we're gonna start with you, James. What are your thoughts looking back at season 8 now? Was it all terrible, or were there bits that you actually liked?
Shit. Like a lot of it looked great, right? It was very if it was a standalone season, right? If there was no links to anything else that had ever happened, it was a brand new world that they brought us and they showed us that. It was full of action, it was full of excitement. That's all well and good, but there were 7 prior seasons that built up an entire story in that world, and that's what people were invested in. We didn't want an action movie made out of it.
That is very true, but I don't know. I mean, there were good bits in it, but overall, I think the main thing is the story was terrible, but it looked nice. I think that's what most people were saying.
If you can compare it to other TV shows, it's still good though, isn't it? Like, there's a lot of shit
but the problem
there,
is the fact that it is Game of Thrones makes it worse. Because like you do say, if it was like just another TV show, then it would be a cool action like medieval fantasy show. But the fact that it is Game of Thrones just makes it that much worse and disappointing. I mean, so I
think a lot of the disappointment was also down to people had massively high expectations for it. They expected it to be world class, which I think was a bit too much to ask, considering how far it had gone and the fact that, you know, the books weren't even written yet, and so they were you know, making it up as they go along, and they didn't have really the time to care for it like they should have. But at the same time, they did do an appalling job. I look back at Game of Thrones now, and I actually don't look back at it very fondly, even though it was my favourite TV show. When I think about rewatching bits of Game of Thrones, even like the earlier seasons, I'm like, I don't really want to, just because of season 8.
Yeah, it's because you know how it ends, and the ending was so bad that it just stains the rest of it. Like, you can see all these, you can watch the first few seasons, you can see these, you know, epic storylines and character developments, and then you know it's all going to go to shit. And so there's no point in being invested in the show anymore.
Well, Sam, favourite bit and least favourite bit of season 8.
Of season 8?
Yeah.
Oh, fucking hell. That's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll start with favourite bit.
Favourite bit? I don't know. There was one bit of good dialogue in the whole season in the last episode, in my opinion.
Which bit was that?
The bit with Jon and Tyrion.
Yeah, I like that.
That was the best bit of dialogue of the entire season. I liked that bit.
I don't know. I like the bit where Jon Snow says, "I don't want it."
Ah, that is classic writing, that, isn't it?
Doesn't he just say that like 500 times?
I don't want it.
It's literally just a transcript of all the recordings Nathan has when he goes on a date with a girl.
This is very rude.
Jesus.
I think my favourite bit was when that lady did that thing and then that other thing went pew.
Oh yeah, when Melisandre
as you can tell, Nathan watched Game of Thrones.
And then my least favourite bit was when that guy did that thing and then that wild hen came along and then they had babies. I didn't like that. I think
you're talking about the wrong show, Nathan. Are you sure you watched Game of Thrones?
I've seen it, yeah. Because that person dies.
You'd be right there.
Where are you up to? Where are you actually up to in Game of Thrones?
Yeah, and then the castle fell down and...
Wait,
where are you up to in Game of Thrones?
Since when was The Rock in Game of Thrones?
Yeah, no, it's a special episode that only the best of us get to see.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Is
that's
that
fair.
what, is
Sam,
that what they
what's
tell you in the asylum?
What's your least favourite moment in Game of Thrones then?
Season 8 or ever.
In season 8? I did ask you this question previously.
Well, I just kind of let the conversation flow, you know, Jacob. I'm a pro.
There is no conversation in this podcast.
What
Worst
conversation?
bit?
It's an interrogation.
Oh.
There's too many to choose from.
Yeah, I know, there really are. You can't really pick up. There wasn't like a specific bad
It's a
moment,
bit like
though, was
asking
there?
the worst bit of like, I don't know,
Sex
communism in China.
Or that.
Oh, what? Excuse me.
Just
Look, I was sore that day.
yeah, that'll do. Communism in China, sure, that's what I was going for as well.
But if you had to choose one bit that really, like, you know, shook you to the penis bone, which bit would it be?
When Jon Snow sent the Dothraki to charge at the White Walkers. What a shit idea.
That's like,
I mean,
They just died instantly.
It was a
Who
horrendous.
decided that?
It was a horrendous idea, and they tried to make a big thing out of it. And then in the very
Yeah,
next
exactly,
episode,
and then it
all
all
the
just went to
Dothraki
shit.
I can answer that
respawned.
question. I know who decided it. It was Jon Snow. You just said that it was him. Yeah, it was a bit of a silly question.
I
to be
actually
fair.
don't think that was John. Was he commanding the battle though? Surely it was Grey Worm who was doing the actual commanding.
Nah, he was in command of his own little men, wasn't he?
I'm not
Oh,
gonna
I
lie.
had a grey
I
worm
think
once.
the
It was
Dothraki.
bad.
I think the
I liked
Dothraki
Grey Worm.
charged themselves in. I don't think anyone told them to do it. I think they're just suicidal fuckers.
They just fancied
I mean,
it.
it was just so pointless because they made such a big thing about it. It was supposed to be the end of the Dothraki, and then the very next fucking
came
episode,
back.
they're all there again. What was the
Yeah.
fucking point?
Or the fucking Golden Company.
Oh my god,
They're as pointless as Jacob's testicles.
dude, that really pissed
There was
me
a whole
off.
build up to it though, wasn't there? Like
They
there was
didn't even
Cersei
swing
getting
a
like
sword.
going through all this stress to like get the Golden Company over, and then they just
That's because
fucking
they didn't
died.
have any elephants. That was the issue.
Yeah, but that's because they couldn't afford elephants.
Yeah, they had no
When I
elephants,
say
which they
they,
fucking
I mean
promised, and everyone
the
wanted to see
producers.
elephants kick the shit out of some people.
Surely they could have come up a better reason without the elephants, because it's just there. It was just like them saying, "Yeah, we didn't have the CGI budget." That was
ridiculous.
the most obvious thing ever.
You could have had like elephants and rhinos and shit just charging in. Would have been, you know, like the Jungle Book, and it would have been awesome. Instead, you get Drogon. Instead, you get Drogon coming from behind, which for some reason they can't fucking hear, and then he suddenly just levels the entirety of King's Landing on top of them. Because in that specific moment, he went Super Saiyan, and just tore the entire walls down.
James, okay then. If you're so adamant that the Golden Company and Drogon were so terrible, what were your worst bits of Game of Thrones season 8, or one worst bit?
I mean, that had to be one of the worst, if not the worst. I think my worst bit was the entire fight with the dead, where all the main characters just had god armor on. They got killed like 20 times each, and they all survived.
More people,
and it was just sort of like,
people should have died.
what do you mean? More people should have died, and they shouldn't have shown them getting overwhelmed all the time, because they died like 5 times on screen. It was like Arya in King's Landing. She died like 4 times or something. What the fuck was that all about?
Sorry, my keyboard nearly just fell over. I was leaning on it too
keyboard
much.
fall over?
Because I've had too much vodka and I was leaning on it.
No. But how does it fall over? It's already laid down.
No, not my computer keyboard.
Oh,
my
no,
Nord
that makes
keyboard.
more sense, to be fair. No, I should have probably... Yeah, shut up. Shut up.
The piano boy.
Oh, fuck. Anyway,
Where were
so
we?
those were my worst parts.
So the Battle of the Dead then?
The Battle of the Dead and the main characters
But it
surviving
looked
where they
pretty
shouldn't
good.
have.
It looked pretty cool.
Yeah,
Well,
but
are
it
you
just
fucking
didn't
Gendry?
make any sense, really.
Nah, that was a good night for me.
Having one final stand in a castle was just stupid as shit and shouldn't have worked.
Well, I think the problem was that it was built up over 7 seasons as the enemy was the White Walkers. They fucked them off in 1 episode.
Yeah,
And then had 3 episodes to create this new supervillain.
The bullshit was as well. They beat the White Walkers in 1 episode after them being this big enemy. Then the next enemy they had to face that was big was the Golden Company, which they flattened with a wall, where there was no challenge. There was literally no challenge.
So, like, from the start,
the challenge was Daenerys' inner struggle.
The challenge was Daenerys' fucking snap moment where she was sat on her dragon and thought, I just want to burn some bitches.
Drogon just slipped one in the bum and she couldn't handle it.
Wait, what? Before season 8 happened, I think in one of the earlier episodes of this podcast, I said that I thought that the White Walkers would win the Battle of Winterfell, then they'd pull back to like Dragonstone or something.
Yeah.
And then have to go on from there.
That's what I
But
wanted.
then when I didn't actually, when I was watching it, I didn't mind that they killed the White Walkers then, because I was like, well, actually, at the end of the day, Game of Thrones is about the politics and the people, so Cersei would be the big bad boss. But then it turned out she actually wasn't the big bad boss, and she just died.
She just drank
that
wine
was
for
great, that.
6
She was-
episodes.
She gave up. She gave up, right? The bells
It's fair
had rung.
enough. Okay, I could have forgiven the fact that they killed the Night King and the White Walkers, but then gone on to make Cersei like the big bad boss. Like the Ballistas did a lot. They killed the rest of the dragons. She like when they went into King's Landing, she then set because there was like wildfire under it, and when there were dragons, there were like shots of wildfire coming up through the ground and stuff. But they never did anything with that. So there's obviously wildfire underneath the city that they showed even in that last battle, but they never did anything with that. So it would have been good if then Cersei the whole time she was just drinking wine, and then once they'd all taken the city and all the good guys had got in, then she set wildfire off and blew up the whole city
It would have
herself.
made more sense.
That would have been an incredible ending.
There
That
was
would
a
have been
lot
so
of
cool.
things that they didn't use though, like Arya face-changing abilities just vanished. There was like that horn that Sam found at Fist of the First Men.
To be
in, like,
fair, though, he
season 3.
found that in like season 3. Though they sort of knocked that off from the beginning.
Yeah,
I think that
but
was just
feel
a
like
nod
that
to the
could have
book.
that could have been a thing, couldn't it?
I feel like that would have been a little bit cheesy bringing that back after like 4 seasons though from the beginning.
They still had the fucking dragon glass going.
They could have done it though, and at least give a nod to the other seasons. I do feel like this season could be a complete standalone season.
It was just
Like,
they
it had-
just sort of gave up on the entire story of Game of Thrones and just made some big battles.
what did they cancel? I mean, Jamie actually having a character arc, they cancelled that.
Yep, that fucks off.
Arya being a faceless man. Jon Snow being the heir to the Iron Throne, which is probably the biggest cancel of a character arc possible. What else did they have? Bran actually having any use as the Three-Eyed Raven. He could have just kept being, I don't know, Year 9 James throughout the whole thing.
Yeah.
It could have been...
Tyrion was a big one. He turned into a dumb sack of shit.
he
That was
did.
absolutely fucking useless. He was basically a potato in the last season. And
By the way, Sam,
honestly.
in Year 9 James was in a wheelchair. That's why Bran is Year 9 James,
Classic.
because he's fat and disabled.
Right, so you're Hodor then.
Me or James?
You.
Oh my god. Fuck. You've just been wrecked, mate. Anyway.
What other storylines?
I
did
feel
they
like
just completely
Cersei's
screw?
story arc. They sort of
Cersei's story
cut
arc.
that off, and they made her out to be a true tyrant, and then she turns all good, she gets soft in the heart, and she gets crushed by some rocks.
Yeah.
She
There was
just
a
did
lot
fuck
of
all
rock
for a season,
crushing
though.
in that last
Yeah,
episode.
that's the bit I was talking about earlier when the rocks fell down, you know?
Yeah, that bit.
Yeah,
Apart
and then
from the
what's
fact
his
that you
face?
called her a man
Is it
and
then
then a
those
horny
two
chicken
brothers
or
start
something?
fighting and then the castle
That's a
falls
different
down?
bit. Different bit
That's
of
the
rocks,
same
mate.
bit, mate.
Different
Trust
rocks.
me. I've
That's
seen
different.
it, mate.
Different rocks.
Okay, no, but my favourite bit of Game of Thrones season 8 is when Qyburn tries to stop the mountain from going to Sandor and he just throws him into the wall. that was the best bit and just smashed his head
That
open.
was
But
pretty cool.
in terms of storylines, the only storyline that actually was done well, I think, was the Hound with his brother. But
Yeah.
even then, like, I feel like it was a little bit predictable, but they sort of...
Yeah, but at
Yeah,
the
but
same
it
time,
needed to happen. It
that-
would have been disappointing if it didn't.
that battle was a little bit bullshit. I mean,
well,
the mountain just
yeah.
had that, but they literally wrote it so that he did not move for the entire fight. Otherwise, he would have just killed the Hound. He could have just
that's
crushed
true.
him against a wall in like 2 seconds.
But also the Hound and Arya's sort of thing off together was done quite well, their sort of relationship together. But apart from that, the rest of it was a bit bad, honestly.
I liked Arya's story in season 8 up until the last episode.
What did she do in season 8?
Well, I don't know. It was just like the King's Landing episode.
Yeah, no, that was horrific.
That was
the
good.
bit where she was just
Yeah.
running around was just...
No, but that was good.
Every
'cause
time
that
it
was
cut
like,
back to it, I was just like, she's not going to die. They faked to death like 5 times.
Yeah.
But,
no, but I mean,
Jacob,
like,
they made up for
the
it because
Hulk.
there was a nice white horse.
There was a nice white horse. He was very fit.
Wow.
Nice muscles.
Would you?
I would. I have.
Jesus. That would change the scene if you just saw Sam in the background pumping this horse.
Yeah, just bumming the horse. Yeah,
going to town.
Okay, James. We've had your worst bit in season 8, but what about your best bit in season 8 then?
Sam bumming a horse.
So, yeah, Sam riding that horse. No, my best bit of season 8. Wow, there's so many choices. My best bit in season 8. It would probably be the interaction with Jon and Drogon. In the throne room.
Classic dialogue.
In the throne room?
I said interaction, not dialogue. Fuck you. Yeah, in the throne room when Drogon ended up burning
I don't know.
the chair.
I didn't quite understand what was going on there.
Well, it was...
Because
I feel like...
he just killed his mum, and he was just like, okay.
Yeah, but I think it was showing that... Because Tyrion had mentioned in an earlier season that dragons know who their allies are. And I think it was sort of showing that the dragon had some level of intelligence to understand that actually Jon did the right thing. The one thing I didn't like so much was him burning the throne was a little bit off because he had no reason to think that was why it all went wrong.
It was a bit too much of an obvious follow on. It was like spoon feeding the viewers a bit too much.
I'd have been fine if we saw him with his aggression to Jon, and then letting him live, and understanding that actually he did the right thing, and then just going off on his own. The burning the chair thing was a little bit unnecessary, but it was a decent metaphor for the show. It's just there was no reason for Drogon to do it. But yeah, I liked the aggression that Drogon showed in the Jon, but he sort of showed that he realised Jon did the right thing and he shouldn't be punished for that. But then
the thing was with the burning the throne though, that was kind of like a metaphor for the end of like a king, wasn't it?
Yeah, but that's the end. Yeah, the issue was there was no reason for Drogon to do it. If it had been that Drogon accepted Jon climbed on Drogon's back and got him to burn the throne, that would have been more powerful. That would have actually
I'm not saying
something.
that. I'm saying the whole throne burning thing, regardless of who did it, it's kind of like a metaphor for the end of the autocratic rule. But then they just go and make another king.
Yeah, they do that. Yeah,
it seems a little bit pointless. I was expecting it to be like a ruling council kind of thing, and then they just went, nah, we're going to go and have a king again.
Another king who
because that went so well last time.
He knows everything, so we can never beat him, we can never outsmart him, so let's just put him in a position of absolute power.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got out of the way the bits that we hate and the bits that we like. Let's go from a different perspective. We'll start with James. James, how would you, briefly, how would you have done season 8 if you were writing it?
I feel like they rushed it. They had... Definitely. A lot of active characters that they wanted to finish in one season, and they couldn't do it.
They had the offer for 12 seasons, I think, but they decided not to.
A big thing that I would have liked is if they'd it would have been easy for them to just kill a couple of people in the battle against the dead, right? And that's their storylines that you don't have to act out, and no one's going to be angry about that because they died in a battle. That could have always been their fate. They never got to the end of their story arc because they were killed against this massive danger and evil that you've built up for the entirety of Game of Thrones, right? You would have accepted that. That would have been okay, and that would have limited the amount of time they had to spend on each character, because there'd have been less characters for them to do. They'd have been able to actually, do justice to more of the characters. It was just so rushed and so disingenuous, because you had people like Jaime Lannister. They tried to give him an arc. He had fucking sex with Brienne and then fucked off. It's like, what do you mean? The fuck do you mean? And then Jon Snow, he doesn't want it. Oh, let's send him to the wall. But there is no Night's Watch.
That's the thing. Jon Snow, literally nothing happened to him. He finished up the exact way he started, which in one point would be like, oh, that's a nice resolution to a story, but it would be a good resolution to the story if something happened in between.
Yeah.
But if something happened in between and it grew him as a character and then it changed and then eventually he was like, he chose, oh no, I want to go back and do this, that would be fine. But the fact that because someone else decided him to go back to the wall, that just made everything that happened in between redundant.
It would have worked with your having a council idea. If they'd have named Jon the king and he refused and told them that they should do a council instead and then went north once they'd set it up, That would have made more sense. If he was the one to actually get rid of the throne, if they gave the throne to him and he was just like, this isn't how it should be done. Let's actually have a council. That would have made sense.
Arc for the whole Jon Snow's the rightful king thing.
It would have been a great arc for the entire show.
That would have worked.
It was a Game of Thrones, and Jon would have just removed the throne, and it would have made sense because he's been the main character for the entire fucking show.
Would you have kept? Were you all right with Arya killing the Night King, or would you rather that was Jon Snow?
I was fine.
I was fine with that.
I thought
that was a good moment. To be fair,
I think it made more sense because all we've ever seen of Jon is him. He's not stealthy, right? Which meant he would have had to fight the Night King in one-on-one combat, and he would have lost. You can't tell me that Jon Snow is better at fighting than the Night King. That's just stupid as fuck. Right? I wouldn't believe it. You've made them out to be these massive enemies. If you can beat them in one-on-one combat, why are they so scary? So
it was just the way.
Bullshit. I think it was.
Were you all right with the fact that the Night King was killed in episode 3? Would you rather that was later on, or would you rather the Night King was the main boss?
I think they should have done more justice to the dead because they.
I feel like we could have had a season for the dead and then a season for Cersei.
I feel like it could have been that they fought really hard against the dead. They lost multiple battles. They got pushed all the way back to King's Landing. Cersei was forced to help them. And then after the battle, Cersei tried to stab them in the back, and that's where they go on to the next season, and they're trying to fight back against Cersei after she's tried to kill them just after they finished fighting the Army of the Dead.
Well, that's exactly what, I saw this on Facebook, a structure of the seasons, and that would have worked really well. So, season 8 was the battle against the dead, so they had, skirmishes against the dead, and the fight, and, episode 9 was the battle in Winterfell against the dead. Arya ends up killing the Night King, and then episode 10 is sort of, the aftermath of that battle. But at the end of that, after Cersei goes to help them to fight the Night King, then she stabs him in the back. That's the end of season 8, and then season 9 goes into them fighting Cersei, and then Daenerys. I wouldn't mind her becoming the queen after that, but then the whole of season 10 would be Daenerys and how it's sort of her story goes out, because the Daenerys thing, I don't have a problem with her becoming the Mad Queen, but it's just like you said, it was so rushed. If they had a whole season her developing. Doing things that sort of showed
a grand total of 10 minutes.
Exactly. If it showed her at the end of season 9 becoming queen, defeating Cersei the Night King, and then slowly her doing things, she became madder and madder, and then it slowly deteriorated. At the end of season 9 or season 10, then Jon Snow killed Daenerys. If basically what I'm saying is everything happened, but it happened over 3 more seasons.
Yeah, exactly.
It would have been fine.
It needed to be spread out.
One thing I did dislike about the way they did the dead and then the fight against Cersei was that they went to King's Landing, right? And they'd had this big thing of Daenerys building up an army strong enough to actually fight Cersei, right? And Cersei just been reinforced by the Golden Company. She still had all her army. Daenerys had just fought the dead, and the whole problem was she didn't want to be Queen of the Ashes, so she wasn't just going to fly over a dragon and destroy the city. Great, but what happens? Drogon flies over, destroys absolutely everything, the soldiers do fucking nothing, and she gets the city, and then she burns it anyway. There was no danger to Cersei's army. They all just disappeared because Drogon was spitting fire at some bloody catapults or whatever. So it was just it just meant that all the build-up of Daenerys actually having to get strong enough to fight Cersei was just pointless because they didn't actually fight an army. The only time they actually fought the army was after they'd given up, and then they fucking stabbed them anyway. And it's it was just a bit weak. It was just, what was the point in the army in the first place? You've spent so long trying to build it up, why couldn't you just have gone and done that 3 seasons ago and got it over with? Bullshit.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, at the end of the day, I feel like... Okay, let's go through this. Sam, out of 10, what would you rate Game of Thrones Season 8?
Yeah, a 4 at best.
Is that in general or in terms of Game of Thrones seasons?
In terms of Game of Thrones.
Okay, what about in general then? If any other TV shows?
I like a 6.5.
You know what? I'd 100% agree with that. What about you, James?
Oh no, you see, I'm gonna be a lot more harsh. I think in terms of other TV shows, probably a 5. In terms of Game of Thrones, I wouldn't give it anything. I'd give it a 0. It was appalling.
Yeah. Well,
it wasn't Game of Thrones at all. It was basically Lord of the Rings in the Game of Thrones world.
Okay, don't offend Lord of the Rings.
Don't
Lord of
you
the Rings.
touch
Come on, James.
Sorry, I meant
Lord of the Rings has
Rings-
actually got good
Sorry,
stuff.
I meant the Lord of the Rings battles, the actual action sequences.
You mean
the
like
entire
just
season,
the battles?
The
and nothing
entire
else?
season of Game of Thrones was literally just one Lord of the Rings battle. That's
Okay,
literally
yeah,
all
I'll
it
agree
was.
with that.
Yeah.
Sorry, you nearly made me like.
Sorry, no.
you know,
I'm not
eat
dissing
my
Lord of the Rings. For
eat
the
my
love
dad.
of God,
Then
that is one
I
of the
nearly ate my
greatest.
dad.
Don't you dare.
That's one of the greatest universes ever, and I wish I was
the best
living in
TV
it.
show ever made is Breaking Bad, and that is just a fact, so we can't go past that. Anyway, I'm sorry, the best TV show ever made is Breaking Bad. There's not a single bad episode. But this is not a Breaking Bad podcast. So Nathan, you're going to take away the next section of this podcast. Have you? Because obviously Nathan hasn't actually watched any Game of Thrones, so he is taking
He's
this.
got
Sorry.
nothing.
Nathan,
First of
are you
all,
ready?
I was drifting off.
sleeping.
Second of all, I nearly got stuck to my chair because it is blooming warm here.
It is so warm.
Do you have a fan?
I do have
I'm
clothes
sat
on,
in a
just saying
swimming
I am
pool at
not
this point.
naked.